Good evening, Dungeon Masters. I'm Baron Darop. Dark Sun is a terrifying campaign setting ripe for geopolitical analysis. That is, the study of how geography influences culture and society. All too often, we play D&D in a feudal setting with a temperate climate. But a good geopolitical tour around the deserts of Dark Sun can help us understand what makes an apocalyptic world tick. It's about to get real, because this is Athas. There are a couple of things we need to touch on to frame our geopolitical trip around the Tablelands. For context, the overuse of magic by defiler wizards has nearly robbed all plant life from the planet. This has resulted in unchecked climate change. The magic's overuse has even distorted the setting's namesake star, causing constant heat waves with daily highs easily pushing over 130 degrees. As a result, the only thing more scarce than water on Athas is plant life, and that's just the beginning of this brutal landscape. The world is almost entirely devoid of metal ore access, with only a few areas worthy of copper mining, one of the softest metals a civilization can use. Moreover, what few iron tools remain from the pre-apocalypse are lost in the ruins that dot the desert landscape or are tightly clenched in the hands of despotic sorcerer kings, evil demigod-like magic users who control the various city-states. Lastly, we know the tyrannical sorcerer kings manufactured and enslaved a race called the Mull. This specifically will become more important when we talk about an apocalypse's effect on demographics. Demographics is a sub-study of geopolitics discussing how populations of various age groups affect a nation's productivity. With all that context, now we can dive into the map. The Dark Sun campaign setting focuses on a region called the Tablelands, a collection of city-states clinging to various oases which dot the hellish landscape. To the east of the Tablelands is the Sea of Silt, the fine sand remains of a nearly evaporated ocean. Even more desolate to the south is a barren obsidian pit, totally devoid of life. In the west, the largest contiguous remnants of plant life make up the Forest Ridge, the last haven not turned to a desolate wasteland. Further westward, this forest gives way to even more desert until one reaches the jagged cliffs, which sharply fall into a hot, humid, never-ending fog bank. For geographical size context, the populated region of the Tablelands is roughly the same size as Texas or France. Now on to the big problem of water access. In this desert apocalypse world, there are no rivers. Only shadows of the Silt Sea's historical coastline remain. But the water hasn't entirely disappeared. The cities which survive are likely able to pump water from various oases and underground aquifer systems. Flooded cave systems like these are in our contemporary deserts as well. The country of Libya draws nearly all their fresh water from the largest aquifer system on Earth, which is, ironically, right underneath the Sahara Desert. However, a lack of aquifer access is likely why so many of the cities near the southern coastline are ruined. They likely drew their water from the now dried up lakes near the southern seashore. This lack of rivers also makes trade extremely difficult to conduct, and thus cultural exchange among population centers is very hard to do. While drinking water is this scarce and travel during the day leaves you exposed to bandits and scorching heat, only the most brave, well-equipped soldiers with the most expensive goods risk making any mercantile journey. Now I want to point out the political tension hotbed of Athas. In the center of the Tablelands, we find a small forested area, home to two separate city-states, Glug and Nibene. Notice the lack of roads connecting them. This is really interesting because these two cities make up the most secure positions on the Tablelands. This area is easily defended on all sides thanks to the regional mountains and already established forts. The cities even have access to timber and copper ore for metalworking, but these cities are likely trapped in a bitter rivalry or political stalemate. The forest region is too small to support any mass defiling magic, so a hot war engagement between the two cities is out of the question. Engaging the enemy on open battlefields would destroy the very thing they're fighting over. This means the two cities will constantly attack each other with deniable assets. Spies, assassins, dissenters, provocateurs, All of these would be employed to disrupt the opposing city-state while keeping a facade of allyship and peace. Ironically, this is likely how the Sorcerer Kings outside the Crescent Forest like it. The remaining Sorcerer Kings are missing key natural resources like timber or metal ore, are far less defensible, and have no reason to trust each other for a joint invasion coalition due to their lack of trade and therefore their independent societal interests. As for the larger forest on the map, it sits behind a massive mountain chain, likely surviving due to the humidity washing over the dunes from the jagged cliffs and the misty border. There aren't any large population centers here, so whatever animals exist are likely the fiercest survivors Athas has ever seen, and they're all crammed into a slowly shrinking Fortnite battle royale. It's likely the forest is even less hospitable than the surrounding desert due to these creatures. It goes without saying, apocalyptic situations cause terrible stress to a population's stability. As an example, a healthy demography will have at least 2.2 children for every family and at least 6 adults for every elderly person. An example of a country with a healthy demography is Nigeria. If the government can find that sweet balance between supporting industry while educating and protecting its workforce, the population has a great future ahead of it. In times of great crisis, however, these population ratios can become skewed and cause issues for the productivity of a nation. Too few adults to care for children and elderly while also trying to maintain agriculture and trade can lead to an economic collapse. If these crises only last a short while, they usually work themselves out though. For example, the world birth rate plummeted during World War II, but the ensuing baby boom in the early 1950s filled the birth gap for most countries. However, the Russian demography didn't quite have the luck. Industrialization and despotic agriculture policy in the 1930s had already curtailed the birth rate, but matters were made even worse by the male population being treated as a disposable horde during the Second World War, the constant fear of nuclear Armageddon during the Cold War, terrible economic depression after the Soviet collapse, and finally the inability of the new federal government to kickstart the contemporary Russian economy has all compiled to nearly 100 years of one Russian crisis after another, and their birth rate shows it. Nobody wants to have children if they're too worried about their future stability. Older people might be great at providing a value-added expertise before they become too elderly to work, but the value add can't be done if some lower production isn't already in progress. A healthy population must have a constant influx of younger people to learn from their more experienced elders and handle labor requiring less education and expertise. With that said, any group of magic-wielding dictators with some level of benevolence during a long-term apocalypse would look at their declining birth rate and scramble to resolve the existential threats. But not the Sorcerer Kings. They would rather watch the world burn and fill that productivity gap with the Mole, a manufactured people designed to be slaves. And this really underscores the true vileness of the Sorcerer Kings and their ilk. These tyrannical despots are so hopelessly evil that the gods have turned their back on them. Even the evil gods. This in turn means that there's no resurrection magic on Athas. Therefore, evil Sorcerer King logic would follow. Why would one bring a child into a horrible world where its life can't be guaranteed? It's much easier to continue defiling the planet to create disposable pawns who will do your bidding. Athas is a terrible, brutal place, and the Sorcerer Kings are to blame. If you'd like to help me make more content like this, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks for watching, Dungeon Masters, and until next time, good night.